Welcome back to the NIL Era podcast. My name is Elise Byun.
And I'm Fernando Andrade. If you listened to last week's episode, number 13, you got to see and hear the real-time updates that happen in college athletics. We were talking about things that had just happened in the moment. We added things last minute. And today we're continuing that discussion of some big updates that have happened this past week, while also having some discussion on what it means for the big picture of college athletics. And just to let everybody in on what's going on here, this is both the latest and the earliest episode we've ever recorded. Latest as in this is Sunday, September 29th, and this is coming out tomorrow, Monday, September 30th, and it's 7:34 a.m. Pacific, 9:34 a.m.
Central.
Central. Yes, I completely forgot Central.
It's early.
But yeah, that's what's going on. There's plenty of updates. I think, Elise, the best one to start with is definitely the UNLV news. We recorded another episode midweek, and we were just talking about that. That'll come out next week. But we were just talking about this. Like, huge headline broke out this past week that UNLV starting quarterback Matthew Sloka announcing he would not play in any more games this season. And this headline was posted on ESPN, On3, Sports Business Journal, and just picked up a lot of different perspectives on the matter. So could you just break this down as to why this is a big deal, right? Like announcing you're not going to play the rest of the season. What's the reasoning behind this?
So first, I think some background. The NCAA has a redshirting rule for some sports, including football, that is a 30% rule where you can compete in 30% of your season and still redshirt to keep your eligibility. So the most common reasons to redshirt is either due to injury, not enough playing time, or honestly just not enough preparation and that readiness to get in the game. So you want to save your eligibility. That's what it's usually for. What's interesting about this UNLV case is that he was the starting quarterback, and for an undefeated UNLV team in a season that has this expanded CFP that we've never seen before, meaning that UNLV has a great shot at a potential playoff bid. So this is possibly the first case we've ever seen of this redshirting due to an NIL dispute. So Sluka claims that he was offered $100,000 to transfer from Holy Cross to UNLV, but has only received $3,000 for relocation. UNLV says Sluka not only received the NIL money that was agreed upon, but also said that he felt he should receive more money and felt that he had the leverage to ask for more due to the 3-0 start from his team. So no one really knows what is actually true in this dialogue, but at this point it's kind of just like a he said she said type of thing. But to me, it just confirms the impact of NIL in the college athletics field.
Well, I mean, I think this is a reflection of the NIL space and the exploitation that could take place in this new era, right? And I don't think many people consider this. So let me dive deep in here a little bit. Many people don't consider how easy it is to get screwed over as a student athlete. People forget, like, yes, of course, you see incredible football players right now on national TV acting like superstars, but you forget how young these kids are. Like, it's 18 to 22-year-olds for the most part. Like, you forget that sometimes, yeah, we don't know what a contract is. We don't know the whole taxes thing, which we've talked about prior, right? So when somebody, let's say a donor, a booster in the collective goes up to you and, yeah, we'll give you 100,000. It's kind of easy to believe that at 18, 19, 20, 21. But where's the contract? Like, if you're not getting paid, it's because you didn't sign a contract. If you had signed a contract, I'm sure you'd be fine. But these are the little things where people just forget. You think, oh, he said, she said, like, you need to sign a contract. I think it would be fascinating to see, like, was there ever a contract signed? Was there an agreement? Was it supposed to be end of season, beginning of season, all at once, split upon the months? Like, how was that supposed to work? And I see that in micro deals, like $100, $150, $600 deals, and now we're seeing it at 100,000, which is like, I think it's a huge issue and something we'll be talking about a lot as this era continues to grow. But for now, what do you make of this decision to just redshirt due to an NIL dispute? I think there's plenty of sides to this. There's the NIL side, there's a teammate side, there's a student athlete side, the competitor side. So, what do you make of this?
I 100% agree with all those perspectives that you just said. There, it's a very complex thing. It's one person, but you're a person, a part of a huge team, a program, a university. So it goes a lot deeper than that. Andy Stable from On Three wrote that everyone had an opinion. People were saying Sluka's selfish for quitting on his team. Others said this is just another case of schools not keeping their promises. But most are just baffled by the NIL dispute in itself. For me, I know we kind of have differing views on this, but this to me just confirms pay for play and where we're at in the field of college sports. If anyone else in the world didn't get the money that was agreed upon for their quote unquote job, because it is Sluka's job to win games, you'd be furious. If you didn't get paid for even an hour of work you did in the office, I'd refuse to work. So to me, for people to say Sluka walked out on his team is a little out of proportion. I think, yes, there might be another side to the story. I think there always is. But I think this is a very reasonable claim as well to decide to redshirt and keep that year of eligibility. But I think no matter what actually went down, it reveals just how little control and guidelines there are from a governing standpoint from the NCAA. You kind of just said it. Where are the contracts? And I think right now in the field of NIL, with all the litigations and preliminary injunctions, no one really knows what the rules are. To me, unless you have a great compliance office and those point people to go to,
Hmm.
you are allowed to sign contracts before you go to those NIL contracts from the collectives. You're allowed to sign contracts. But I don't think people know that because it's so wishy washy. Are you allowed to talk to boosters? Are you allowed to sign the contracts? No one really knows because it changes all the time. And I think this will continue to happen in terms of people redshirting and people foregoing their rest of season, whatever that looks like. I think this will continue to happen from bigger players at bigger schools. This was the case for a group of five school, which is also just pretty tough in general because I think the group of five programs just don't have the collective money as powerful as the Power Five programs yet. I think it's coming, but I think the group of five schools right now are pretty vulnerable in those star players and key players maybe redshirting and keeping that eligibility to transfer somewhere else if that NIL money isn't good enough for them.
Yeah, I mean, respectfully, right? Because that is a lot of money, especially for our sports. But if you're QB1 at a big school, 100,000 is essentially like not making it.
Yeah.
So I understand that the UNLV perspective is different. With that being said, I think this does confirm pay for play without a doubt because yeah, you had agreed for something. There probably wasn't a contract, and you now feel like exploited. So I understand that point. Excuse me. I understand that point of view, but I think my issue is on the flip side. Like, what is this doing to sports again? And that's like, listen, I'm not against pay for play. I'm against there not being a set of rules. And if right now the set of rules is amateurism, I'd rather people just stick with it. Like it's not that I'm against the idea of pay for play. I'm against the idea of not having a set of rules that everybody can play under. Because to me, I'm not thinking about QB1 right now. I'm thinking about his teammates that are like, fuck, this guy just left me hanging for the rest of the season when we were 3-0, probably going to have a good playoff run or a, I don't know, a bowl game. Like you just left me hanging. And I'm thinking like that teammate, I would be furious because I did the same work. I showed up just like you. Yes, you can perform better, but like I was right there with you. I was your brother. I was your teammate. Like we were putting on the same shirt and you're just going to leave me hanging like that. And that's my biggest issue. Like when you don't have a clear set of rules, you allow for things like this to happen. And I think that's just going to literally ruin sports because you have some people that get paid, others that don't. Like, how is that going to work? What does that do to a locker room? That this is something we've talked about plenty. I've talked to multiple guys on different schools, different teams, specifically for football though, just like bigger numbers. And while they don't openly talk about how much they're making, they can tell because there's 100 guys on a team, and then there's 10 that start dressing differently and getting new cars and have this watch and all these things. And it creates some weird sort of tension of like, we're doing the same thing. Obviously, yeah, you're producing differently. That's great. We're all happy. But like, I'm getting nothing and you're getting all that. And when it's 10 versus 90, I think it's just so dangerous for what it could create. And that's what worries me. That it's like, again, make it pay for play, whatever you want, but have it be even. Because I'm just, what comes to mind with this story is just his teammates. Like, I wonder how they're feeling right now.
I agree with in terms of the teammates, and like I can't really imagine like if one of my all-arounders on our team left, I don't really know how I'd feel, but at the same time, I fully believe not everyone should be treated the same. Some people are better than others. Some people make more money in terms of you want to come and watch that person play. Like I should not 100% be paid as much as the all-rounders on my team. No shot. Absolutely no shot. Yeah, we do the same work. I am not as good as you. I am 100% not as good as you. I don't think I should get the same amount of money as you. No shot. So I think, sneak peek as to the guest and episode that's going to come next week, but we talked about it, that locker room culture. If this is what divides you, your team was not strong enough to start with. And like I fully believe that. Like if my team had that culture of people are flaunting their money, whatever, like no, that's just not a thing in our team. That will never be, and it never has been. And I think that at the end of the day is kind of what grounds everyone. But I think no matter what you believe in terms of pay for play, we need a solution to the empty promises of NIL. But what is the solution? Is it employee contracts between school and athletes? I don't really know, because right now I would say football and basketball players act as free agents. You're playing year to year and seeing where it takes you, because especially for athletes who are good at their sport but not good enough to go pro, I fully believe you need to maximize everything you can in your time in college. If that means you transfer, and if that means your goal is to get a bag, maybe not a degree at the best institution you can, so be it. That's your right. You have the right to do that. I think it's quite telling how the NCAA is wanting to police deals of these athletes, when I think they need to be policing the people trying to scam these athletes into coming to their program. The contracts of collectives are not universal practices, meaning some collectives run contracts month to month or year long signings. I think for anyone listening, written contracts are a must. Clearly, from this example, verbal contracts or verbal agreements don't mean anything, no matter how much you trust someone. But also in Sluka's case, we don't know if he had a contract or if it was month to month, year to year. Like, we don't know. If it were a month to month contract, I think he's smart for demanding more money. UNLV has beat Houston and Kansas this year already, two Power Four teams, and his value as a player has gone up. And I think the timing of Sluka redshirting due to an NIL dispute was almost poetic, in the fact that it came 48 hours before NCAA lawyers argued that revenue share and college athletics isn't in a pay for play era with the House settlement.
Yeah, and we'll get into the house settlement right now, but again, just to keep playing devil's advocate here, I think the hard thing is we don't know the contract. We
Mm-hmm.
don't.
Yeah.
If it's month to month, totally agree he should be asking for more. But if you had 100K, if 100K was agreed upon before, like that was agreed upon, right? So it's not a month. You're not getting 100K a month. So if that was already agreed upon, let's say they were fulfilling that payment, I don't think it's fair to be asking for more when that was already agreed upon, because the bet that was taken from that transfer was before the season.
Mm-hmm.
So let me flip it. If they were 0-3, could the boosters be saying, I'm not going to pay you as much because you're 0-3? That's where it's not fair.
Yeah.
Like that whole idea. And I'm mentioning this not to, I mean, not to say that you're wrong, but because I think this is how people are starting to think. Respectfully, a holy cross transfer to UNLV for 100K. Again, it's difficult for football because there's no minor leagues. There's like the Canadian football, but there's no like minor leagues for the NFL. But in what world are you making 100K? Like, just putting that into perspective of like, are you really worth that? And
Well, look at the stadiums.
I
Like,
know, and
like,
yeah.
yes, he is.
So no, but that's my thing. Like, at what point are people starting to ask for too much? And I'm not talking specifically here. So this is the example, but then you feel like you're entitled to this, entitled to that. And I think 3-0, I mean, yes, it makes plenty of sense. But my point being, it's easy to see this Alabama kid like going off. It's easy to see the SEC schools just doing incredible things. But there's the in between, this group of five schools, this smaller Power Five school. I think that's the issue. Like, I think that's the biggest thing about the NIL era of you're not talking about $20 million, which we've seen for like the top players. We're talking six figures, which is a lot of money still, but it's easy to not sign a contract. It's easy to, I mean, to talk about verbal agreements don't mean shit, especially like, oh, I verbally committed to this school. Doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. So that like my point is, again, 3-0, yes, 100K, I get it, stadium filled, whatever, totally. But then are others going to start feeling entitled to that same amount? Are boosters going to get to say like, well, you went 0-3 instead of the 3-0 that I wanted, so now I'm not going to pay you? Like, there's so much room for this like BS when you really just need a contract. And I think that's the thing. I see it in deals with brands. I see it now with this. Why are there no contracts? What game are we playing here? That's my issue. But I think that ties in well with a bit more lawsuit mania, which is the house settlement. We've talked about this plenty. Episode 3, episode, I believe, 8 with the man himself, House Grant. Then we talked about it again recently. And here we are again. The house settlement is just season 1's biggest thing so far. What's going on here? What are the updates of these revisions? I know there were still revisions being made. So where's the house settlement at right now?
Like we talked in the last episode, there was another hearing. There wasn't too much in terms of revisions. The biggest thing we saw was the word booster get taken out and called an associated entity or individual. And that includes 5 types of entities or individuals that would fall into this category. And the definition is quite literally a definition of a booster, and that would include NIL collectives. So, for example, deals with commercial third parties like shoe companies or apparel brands are exempt from enforcement. Deals with individuals whose families have provided less than 50,000 in support to a particular institution will also be exempt. So vocabulary has changed, but not much of the actual settlement did. If this language change doesn't satisfy the judge, which I really doubt it will, there still might not be a settlement and the case could still go to trial. What I think is interesting is we're seeing groups of student athletes try and object the settlement. A group of student athletes led by Big Ten women's basketball players sent a letter to NCAA President Charlie Baker asking to drop its proposed restrictions on NIL deals. The letter stated that they were concerned that so far they haven't had enough voice in a process that could reshape the future of college sports. One Northwestern player says, quoting her, "It deeply bothers me that people are making decisions without us having any say in it. Decisions are being made above our heads about what we deserve in compensation." So it's not only the judge who has a problem with these NIL restrictions, but the student athletes themselves. They wrote a letter, they sent it, they're voicing their opinion. I think it's also important to note that no matter what happens with the settlement, it doesn't stop labor and employment lawsuits. So that includes the Johnson versus NCAA, the NLRB cases with Dartmouth and USC athletes, and also any Title IX lawsuits. So we kind of talked about it before, that NCAA wanting that antitrust exemption, it's not coming. For sure, it is not coming. And clearly, the settlement also still needs a lot of work. So I'm interested to see what the judge thinks, because this wasn't like the other hearing where it was kind of Zoom and everyone can kind of look into it. It was kind of just they sent in their proposals and the judge kind of looks at it again. So I'm interested to see what she thinks. To me, they just reworded the word booster. So I can't see this being approved.
Which is like, again, and I hate to just keep like hitting at the same point, right? But it's just like, I think we just needed to accept the fact that there will be change taking place, because otherwise you're just like beating around the bush and just saying like, well, I'm going to change this word, but you're not changing anything. Like, it's never going to change back. Like, I want to just provide perspective here, right? This settlement is going to probably change the history of the NCAA. That makes sense. But for people that are against it, it's never going to go back to what it was.
Yeah.
Like, in no world will there never be payments again. Will there never be boosters playing a role? Will there never be brand deals playing a role? Because even if boosters just get completely thrown out, I am positive a powerful donor can just go up to a brand and like launder that money. Just
Oh, yeah.
being like, all right, here's what you're gonna pay this guy, and just like sponsor him, and here's some for you, and here's some for the kid. It's that, like, never, ever, ever will we go back to what it was.
And that was the problem with NIL when it started. The NCAA was so anti NIL. And then when the state started passing it and they had to pass it, they didn't create any guidelines. My thing is stop sitting on your hands and praying to God that employment doesn't happen, blah, blah, blah doesn't happen. You know what? It's going to happen. So let's make it the best that we can. Why can we not shape the future and make this the best environment? If you still want to call them student athletes, great, fine, whatever. But you know what? Like, this is reality. Let's figure it out. Because the no, they're not employees. No, they don't make us this amount. Like, that's BS. Like, it is clearly a business. It is clearly a business. Don't try and act like it's not, because it is. And for your student athletes who this is also why like you keep getting sued, is student athletes post grad look back on their experience and they're like, you know what? I think I was exploited. Like, that's what happens. Because when you're in it, you're 18 to 22 years old, you don't really know what's happening. And then afterwards, you look back at that experience, even for myself, working at a sports network, there is so much money that is in college sports. Like, holy crap. I'm employed because of college sports and these student athletes. I am employed because of that. And you're telling me like this isn't a business? Like, no. Let's be real. Like, you have a job because of this. You make so much money as an AD, as a conference commissioner, as the NCAA president, because of the business that is college sports. Like, let's acknowledge that and let's shape what comes next, because we are in a new era and student athletes need to be in the room. They have to have a voice. That's always been a problem and it still is a problem. Let's shape what's next and make it better.
And I think the whole tension here is, does a business exist because of the athletes or because of the universities? And which is like a big perspective, right? Because there are the Tim Tebow's, the Caitlin Clarks, the biggest of biggest names ever. But then proportionately, how many of those names don't we know? And I think that's where it's interesting. And that's where it's about the value of an individual and just being like, no, not everybody should be treated the same. Not everybody should be paid the same, which is the issue with amateurism. Again, that's my issue of like, adapt the rules, because per amateurism, yes, everybody should be treated the same. Yes, everybody should be dressed in the same uniform, just show up in the same way. When you're a pro, you're not going to pay Messi the same thing as his backup player, right? Like, that's just not how it works. I think there's just a bigger debate of, do we support Cal football because it's Cal or because of its players? And like, does a business exist because of Cal or because of its players? How does that work? And maybe there are some players that make up the program and just completely change it. And maybe it's those players that should be involved in the business. But for every 100 players on a football team, how many of those exist? I think it's like 5 at a time would be too much, in my opinion. So it's interesting. I'm only bringing this up not because of Cal. I'm bringing it up because I think the NCAA has a lot to think about moving forward. And I think the whole philosophy of the college business is interesting, of who makes what. Because the network, again, it's not like the network isn't doing its job. It's doing a lot. That's why they're making so much money. If it's not for them, for their branding, for their broadcasters, for everything they're doing, people wouldn't watch. That's the truth. So they're capitalizing on other people. That's for sure. But they're doing it legally. And if people do watch for one player, for that Caitlin Clark, maybe Caitlin should get a proportion. But then, like, again, what rules do you create for that? What's the guideline? It's all over the place, especially because these athletes change every couple years. So that's my rant on that. But I mean, clearly the NCAA has a lot in its hands with lawsuits, and there's more and more coming up every day. It seems like. I mean, you said on this podcast before, just before of the NCAA hoping, sorry, to stop being sued for antitrust lawsuits. But again, Reggie Bush made headlines by announcing he is also suing the NCAA on past NIL damages. What's going on here? What's going on here this time? There's so much coming up this week. What's up now?
So Reggie Bush is suing USC, Pac-12, and the NCAA. This is another case of past athletes wanting to be fairly compensated for their NIL. But what I think is important to note is Reggie Bush getting his Heisman back shows the change that is happening in college athletics. His attorney states, this case is not just about seeking justice for Reggie Bush, it's about setting a precedent for the fair treatment of all college athletes. Our goal is to rectify this injustice and pave the way for a system where athletes are rightfully recognized, compensated, and treated fairly for their contributions. So, exploitation of these athletes are still happening and will continue to happen until the system changes. We've talked about it already a lot today about the system and the rules behind it. And there was a conference and panel discussion around how NIL has played out on campuses that highlighted both Nick Saban and Charlie Baker. And Nick Saban stated, and I quote, college sports are not a business. It's revenue producing. We reinvested in the players and opportunities for non revenue sports so that they have an opportunity to graduate and compete. Nick Saban then went on to explain that should players be paid more money in the NIL budget, they would be considered employees and have to pay taxes on every dollar they receive. So, for so many years, the paying taxes argument has been made on employment. And to me, that's just not valid anymore. Everyone right now, in real time, is technically supposed to pay taxes on their athletic scholarship from the stipend money they get. You also pay taxes on NIL deals. So I just don't think it's a reasonable claim towards employment anymore on this, like, you have to pay taxes. You already are paying taxes. And if you're not, you should be. I also find it funny that Nick Saban, out of all people, are claiming college sports isn't a business when his paycheck in 2023 was $11.4 million. And even now in 2024, not as a coach, but as an advisor, his base salary is $500,000. So to me, it's just like, you of all people should know that this is a business, but it's also just another person and another case of people trying to limit athlete compensation.
I mean, I think the whole business side to it with 11.4 million is a kind of hard argument to make, but I think even the advisor role or what he's doing with college game day, etc. Like, I think that is his own NIL nowadays because he's retired, he's out of the game now. I think that's his NIL at this point. So, I mean, kudos to him, but yeah, the 11.4 is difficult. I think it's interesting to say revenue versus business which I mean, he's obviously saying revenue versus profit. I think it's interesting because he does bring up a good point of trying to give this money to non-revenue teams and what that will look like in the future, which we've talked about plenty. Like this will destroy teams and programs moving forward unless they can get endowed. Realistically, that's what's going to happen. And endowment, by the way, is just more boosters coming in for smaller sports. That's what it means. We just saw it with Cal Golf a few weeks ago. 25 million anonymously just showed up, right? And I mean, they're set for life now, which is awesome to see. But that's, I mean, it's mini collectives that just aren't for football and men's basketball. And fortunately or unfortunately, that's the future. So I think, yes, some of these arguments are outdated. People are supposed to be paying taxes, which is a whole other conversation we can have another time. But yeah, I mean, just to close out with that, it's hard because I totally do personally agree with them. Just because there isn't a set model for what we're gonna do moving forward.
That's why we have to create it. Like
I know that's everything I'm saying. Like I'm not against the idea. I'm against, so again, just to clear my argument here, I'm not against the idea. I'm against the fact that there's 50 different rules for 50 different states and everybody gets to do whatever they want. I don't like that. I want there to be an even playing field so that everybody can compete at the highest level. That's what I want. My issue is they can do this and these people can't because they're in different states. Like, can we just create a guideline instead of changing the word booster or donor, whatever it was in the House settlement? Can we just come up with a set of rules that everybody can agree on and pass it federally? Like, could we do that instead, please?
Yeah, you'd think.
I'd love to think so. Let's wrap this up. Pac-12, what is going on with the conference of used to be champions?
Like always, our beloved Pac 12 is making headlines yet again. So, like I said in the previous episode, there are exit fees when you move into conferences, new things like that, and those fees can add up. And for the Pac 12, they felt these fees were unlawful. So, there have been cases in the past where institutions sue their old conferences to lower that said exit fee. Maryland did it to the ACC when they moved to the Big Ten, but there has never been a conference suing another conference until now. So, making what seems to be history, the Pac 12 has sued the Mountain West just days after it tried to recruit more Mountain West schools to join the conference. The lawsuit is seeking to invalidate the fees the Pac 12 agreed to pay in the football scheduling agreement. There was they called it a poaching penalty. This poaching penalty fee stated that the Pac 12 would pay the fees if it poached any Mountain West members. The Pac 12 is claiming that this poaching penalty violates federal and state antitrust law, California's unfair competition law, and is unenforceable penalty. In the lawsuit, the Pac 12 writes, the poaching penalty weakens the Pac 12 in competition with other conferences for Mountain West member schools, diminishes the compensation available for schools interested in joining the Pac 12, and reduces Mountain West schools' options for mobility. They are really claiming that the poaching penalty limits not only Mountain West schools, but puts specifically the Pac 12 at a disadvantage by taking advantage of the Pac 12's position earlier this year. Like you'd imagine, there's already been a lot of back and forth between the two conferences. We saw it even very indiscreetly when the Mountain West and Pac 12 didn't renew their scheduling agreement, with later the Pac 12 saying that the Mountain West wanted $30 million in renewal. The Mountain West commissioner then released a statement saying how the Mountain West wanted to help the Pac 12, but not at the expense of the Mountain West. I think it's funny because there was a rumor that Utah State joined the Pac 12, but no confirmations were actually made, like no headlines, nothing like that. But once the lawsuit was filed, in it, if you read it, it stated that Utah State was a part of the new Pac 12. So everyone was like, oh, so it did happen. And like any change in positions, you are kind of in a position now to negotiate. So it was announced that Air Force and UNLV will remain in the Mountain West, but at a cost. They both are expected to review and have a signing bonus between 25 and $30 million, which is 5 times their media rights value. This money is coming from the pending exit fees the Mountain West will receive from the Pac 12. And the schools have agreed to the following revenue distributions from their signing bonus. Air Force and UNLV will get 24.5%. Nevada, New Mexico, San Jose State, and Wyoming will receive 11.5%, and Hawaii will receive 5%. So, where does that leave everyone? First, they need to resolve the lawsuit. I'm interested to see if Pac 12 will actually win or if they did this lawsuit to just hopefully get a decrease in those exit fees. But further than that, Mountain West needs 2 more members and Pac 12 needs 1 more member to be a FBS conference. And since the last update today, Sunday, September 29th, Texas State has a verbal offer to join the Mountain West. They haven't joined the Mountain West yet. We'll see if they do, but as of today, they have a verbal offer. By tomorrow morning, who knows? Maybe they will be a part of the Mountain West when this episode gets released. We'll see. But like always, our Pac 12 doing the most. Teresa Gould, the commissioner, she's really fighting, and I respect it. So we'll see where this all goes for sure.
Revenue distribution for the media right deals is a fantastic idea that I think athletic departments can look into. That percentages is just a great way to break it down to just wrap up everything we've talked about. But fascinating, just everything that's going on with the Pac-12. That does wrap up everything we have here. And again, breaking news even just 12 hours ago, College Game Day coming to the University of California, Berkeley. So
First time ever.
It'll be exciting.
I'm so excited.
I'm curious as to where the setup will be. Surely it'll be by the stairs at the stadium.
Like, is it going to be happening at the Glade?
That would be hilarious.
Imagine Nick Saban walking up the hill to the stadium. Imagine that.
Yeah.
I would love. That's so funny. Nick Saban on the campus of UC Berkeley.
For reasons we don't have to, for reasons we don't have to say, we'll just leave it there.
I'm so excited. Also, I'm wondering who's going to be like our game day, like our person, that special guest. I wonder who that's going to be. I think Jared Goff, because Lions don't have a game next week. So kind of hoping it's him. I'm wondering who like the special team will be. I'm hoping it's Cal Women's Gymnastics. Allegedly, we're doing like our rings at halftime. So I'm hoping it's us. Selfishly, I hope it's us. I will be back in town. Yeah, I'm so excited.
Go Bears.
Go Bears.
And that is it for today. We'll see you all next week for a very exciting episode with Duke men's basketball player is all I can say.
Yay.
So thank you all for watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, please follow the podcast. That is it for today. We will see you all next Monday.
Bye.